Hello everyone, Dr. Shabazz here, and I am going to present to you a review video, chapters 1 through 3, for our exam on this upcoming Monday. We will take a approximately 50 question exam with the Scantron and the paper exam. We're going old school, this first one, and perhaps at least one of your exams may be via Canvas, but I will announce when I will make that decision. This first exam covers 3 chapters which deal with the global environment. The first chapter dealing with globalization, the second chapter dealing more with the environment itself, and the third chapter dealing with the regional groupings. And so we have looked at globalization, we have looked at a particular case of Cheetos. We looked at the case of McDonald's. These are very illustrative cases of how the global environment is very complex and, of course, very unpredictable in terms of controlling for all of the different factors when you go into a foreign environment. In this exam, you will be asked a number of questions from the book. Hopefully you have made the investment to purchase the textbook, which is this text here. It has 6 authors, and if you are a Cengage subscriber, you're able to get all of your textbooks, and the ebook is available. It doesn't make a difference to me what form you get. I happen to be more of a physical, I like the physical form because you're able to interact and very quickly and not have to scroll through pages and figure out where you're going in the book. And I think there's something about the tactile experience of holding a book and looking through it, looking at the pictures and rifling through and seeing such a wide surface. And it is very important that you do get the book and that you read it. And at a minimum, you want to make sure that you go through the key terms. You'll find them in the margins. You want to go through the summaries at the back. If you look toward the end of the chapter, they will have a chapter summary. So you want to make use of that as well. And so you want to make sure that you max out your performance and do all of the studying of the materials that I cover on the announcement. You'll notice I made an announcement, and in that announcement I had all of the topics, and plus I had videos that you can watch, including the McDonald's videos. If you weren't in class when we watched it, that video is available. The case, the Cheetos case, I have a link to it, and there are other materials that you may want to check out. In fact, this is the page I'm going to bring on the screen here. This is the announcement that I made earlier, and so you will see the content here. I actually have an audio recording of a speech I gave at Clark Atlanta University on globalization, so you may want to look at that. I may even have a bonus question on that recording. And here you have the video. It's a review of chapter 1, but the McDonald's video is at the end. And then I have some of the other topics and another review of chapter 2, and then this one is a review of chapters 1 through 3. Is actually the video that you're watching now. All right, so this is not it's not a study guide. it is more or less kind of an overview of certain topics that we have covered. So make sure that you come on time, you bring a pencil, you'll need a number 2 pencil. I will not have a supply of pencils for you. So make sure you come prepared, make sure you come well rested, and make sure that you maintain your own integrity and you have confidence in your own abilities. I'm looking forward to getting this first exam out of the way. Then that means that we're well on the way to covering the rest of the material, and I believe we will do very well moving forward. So study hard this weekend, and if you have any questions, make sure that you send me a Canvas message or an email, and I will respond to you as soon as I am able to. Okay? Study hard. I'll see you Monday. Take care. The chapters that we have The Rise of Globalization is our first chapter. We have The Evolution of International Business, and then our third chapter is What is Regional Economic Integration? And let's start with chapter 1. Chapter 1 is kind of a staple for global business or international business courses because it talks about how the world operates and the global landscape as far as economic activity is concerned, most notably trade. And so the book starts out with the definition of globalization, and which will be on a following slide. But if you want to find that definition, it's on page 5. So it gives you the definition, and it describes it as a socio-economic reform process of eliminating trade, investment, information technology, and political barriers across countries, which could lead to increased economic growth and geopolitical integration and interdependence among nations of the world. Okay, that was a lengthy definition, and maybe it could have been simplified or worded differently, but that's the definition they have in the book. What is more important to me is describing an example that they give in the second paragraph. And that paragraph reads, consider a real-world situation. Imagine sitting and relaxing on a leather couch in your house or apartment, sipping a cup of coffee or tea, and watching a television show on the Discovery Channel. Chances are high that the leather couch you are seated on was made in Italy, the cup was made by Corning of the United States, the coffee came from Colombia but was processed by Nestle of Switzerland, or the tea came from India and was processed by Lipton's of the United Kingdom. The Sony television was manufactured in Japan, and the Discovery Channel program was broadcast live from Masai Mara in Kenya. Perhaps the clothes that you may be wearing are from China. So this is the picture that they're painting when they talk about globalization. They talk about the interdependencies and the fact that we're able to get products from many different parts of the world because of this activity. And many countries have specialties. And so the way this global system works is each country will produce what they're good at producing. It makes perfect sense. You have a certain amount of factor endowments, land, labor, and capital. And so you will use that set of resources in order to produce what you produce efficiently. Now, there's something very interesting about the trend of globalization. It used to be that people looked at globalization as westernization because there was this emphasis of American and European products going to other parts of the world. And so people took that to mean, okay, you really mean westernization because you're giving me all of these consumer products coming from the West. But what you have now and what the paragraph suggests that I just read was that you're getting all of these products from different places. Many of these products, electronics, come from Asia. You have a big major corporation, Samsung, which makes a whole array of products, of electronic products that we have come to know very well in terms of quality and design. You also have the big American companies like Apple, but you have others that are also in great competition. There was a kind of a reality show some years ago, maybe about a decade ago, Made in America, and it was produced by ABC, and it kind of caught my attention because I looked at it as kind of this idea of what America has become. And essentially, it was an experiment. And this experiment involved going into households and discovering what was made in America and what was made elsewhere. And so I will give you an idea. There's actually a video. This is an article that's associated with that program. It was hosted by Diane Sawyer, and this was called a Made in America Challenge. And so this video here that I will show you will give you an idea of what that experiment entailed.
I buy American products every single day.
One thing I do look for is the tag that says Made in the USA.
I buy American products.
75% of the products I buy are American.
I always look for labels that are made in America. It keeps jobs in America.
So join in tonight and look around you at your home. What do you own that is actually made in the U.S., preserving American jobs? Well, this week we're going to launch our first reports, Made in America. And tonight, one family faces the truth about foreign goods and what it means to say, let's get to work together. David Muir and that family, like so many of us.
We searched all over the country for one very brave and willing American family. Meet the Usrys, mom, dad, son, daughter, and the dog, Amber. They were like so many other families who told our producers their house must be filled with plenty that's made in America.
I'd like to think we buy more American than the typical family.
And they agreed to let World News come and check. We flew to Dallas. We were on our way to the Usrys. So we've arrived at Snow White Drive, which is where they live. A street with parents walking their children to school, American flags in the front yards. And the Usrys were about to be invaded.
Hello!
Hey, it's World News. How are you?
Our Made in America challenge about to begin.
So have you guys ever really thought about what's made in America and what's not in your house?
Not until now.
John is an advertising executive and a stay-at-home mom. And these proud American parents told me, of course we buy American. But what would happen when we start to pick things up?
This is made in China.
And the cross?
Honduras.
Made in Honduras.
You're covering the world here. Made in Thailand.
Yeah.
Had you ever flipped this over before?
Never. Never.
Never even crossed your mind?
Never.
No.
So I see the kids' stash here.
And what could be more American than all of that money made on the Monopoly board?
The dice and tokens made in China.
Not American. And the coffee table?
Tables made in India. Assembled by me, actually.
Right here
So-
in the den.
So
Came in a
made in
box.
India, assembled here in the house.
That's
Yes.
correct.
Doesn't count.
No.
And that was just the living room.
Usually looking at what's on the plate, not underneath it, right?
Right.
Right.
So here's the test.
The table was made in Thailand.
And the chairs?
Mexico.
And we had a fork from,
Same patterns.
this one's from Korea,
China.
and the plate was from Japan.
Yes.
Is there anything made in America on this table?
It does not appear to be that way.
Hey, Landon,
Even the children's rooms.
what about your Texas hat here?
Let's see. Bangladesh.
So this is your room, huh?
And little Ellis and her prized American Girl dolls.
Right there. What does it say? Made in
China.
Ella saw us checking her parents' living room. What about Barbie's?
Where's your couch made from?
Over here, see?
Yep, China.
You might laugh, but in the 1960s, 9 out of every 10 products Americans bought were made in America. Today, more than half of what we buy is foreign-made. So we wondered, could the Usrys manage without any foreign-made products at all?
So we're going to ask you if you would leave your own house in our hands.
And they did.
Hi, David.
You're really going to leave me with your house.
It's all yours.
Take one last look.
Just me and the dog left. But as the Usrys drove away, they had no idea what they'd already learned was just the tip of the iceberg. Because back inside, we kept going. It was every room of the house, the bedroom, their bedspread, Pakistan, nightstand, Indonesia, the lamp, China.
We actually have movers waiting across the street here to take out everything that isn't made in America. And this is where it's all going. Anything foreign made from inside that house, right in here.
The stove ripped out. The refrigerator gone. The piano.
That is a heavy piano. Whew. All right, the living room down, the kitchen down, the bedrooms.
And every inch of that trailer filled. And with the sun setting, the Usrys were about to return to this, and this, and this. Their living room with one lone vase.
Welcome home. And an even bigger challenge tomorrow night, trying to find American goods to replace every one of those items we took out. The big question, would we succeed? And Diane, you and I were talking about this number earlier. Economists say if we spend 1% more than what we're spending right now in American goods, we could create 200,000 jobs immediately, which is why we're doing all this.
That's 18 cents a day
18 cents.
to create so many American jobs. All right, can't wait to see their faces tomorrow night. Thank you, David.
So that was a series, and just to give you an idea of what happened, the family came back, and so they let them in the house, and they had the vase in the middle of the floor with the silk plant, and that was all that was made in America. Everything else had been taken out, and so they try to replace everything in the house with an American equivalent. They were able to do it, but with a lot of effort. They had to call around the country for specific things that had to be made in America. And there were some things they were not able to find, or things that they were not able to replace. And so they had to, as the experiment goes, they had to go without. But it was very interesting. I might add that when they replaced the furniture, all of the appliances, the place did look significantly better because it was all new stuff. But it just goes to show you that when you think about globalization, a lot of times you don't know how close to home it hits until you start looking at what it is that you buy and where it's from. And we don't normally flip things over and look at tags and find out where it was made, but I thought that was a very interesting experience, and it kind of pointed to where globalization is today. So in this outline that I posted on yesterday, we are faced with the rise of globalization, and we saw a prime example there. And on your exam, I will have questions about the organizations that helped spur this globalization. And some of those organizations are, of course, the WTO, which is the world's referee for trade between countries. It's just like a referee at a game or some type of an official making sure everybody plays fair and by the rules. You have the World Bank and the IMF, which are international financial institutions, or IFIs, that make funding available for countries for both short-term and long-term needs. The IMF for short-term emergency needs, and the World Bank for long-term development needs. You also have the GATT organization, which was chartered in 1948. And that became the WTO in 1995, and that is the referee that I was talking about. But there was another organization that was founded in 1945 that is not mentioned in the book until chapter 11, and that is the United Nations, which is actually based in New York. And it is a international body of nations that are seeking to provide a forum for discussing issues to promote peace and to resolve conflicts. And they have their General Assembly every September, and all the diplomats and ambassadors and heads of states come into New York, and they discuss resolutions, they discuss world issues and problems. And so that organization is also a big part of this globalization push. And I believe it should have been mentioned in chapter 1. But be that as it may, I'm mentioning it here, and more details will be given to you later on. So you should have an idea of these organizations and what they do and what their purpose is. There was an article called The Globalization of Markets, written by Theodore Levitt. And that article essentially stated that, or it was his contention, and I'll give you this other slide here, which I have uploaded. I uploaded a PDF version of this. But if you look at these highlights, when you talk about globalization of markets, Theodore Levitt's article was very critical in igniting a debate. And his contention was that this idea of globalization would feature mass standardization of products, which means all the products will be manufactured the same and they will be sent all around the world with very little adaptation. And so this was his contention, 1983 Harvard Business Review. And he certainly created a stir in essentially saying that cultural differences won't matter because everybody's going to want these products coming from the United States and Europe because they're all high quality products and they've been standardized at that level of quality such that they're desirable. There's another faction of pundits and scholars who disagree with that. And when I first read his article, I was in disagreement with his contention as well, because of course culture is enduring, is multifaceted, and people are not as just so willing to say, okay, I'll accept these products coming from the United States and Europe, and even though I have a different taste in terms of my taste buds or my styles, I'm going to accept these westernized versions. I just thought that was a bit presumptuous and naive to think that everybody's just going to accept these products just because they are made in America or that they come from Europe or some of these other places. But there is a such thing as branded products. So when you talk about branded by country, people do have respect for countries' exports. If products are coming from Japan or if they're coming from the United States, they tend to have a reputation. And so that may be what Levitt is referring to in terms of saying that the demand for quality products would supersede the cultural differences. And so that was one controversial article that was put out, and people are still debating this issue. And some of the other things, globalization of production, globalization of markets, globalization of production. Where are you getting your products made? Are you offshoring? Are you outsourcing? You're trying to get access to cheaper labor, cheaper materials, and you're trying to increase your margins. And so these are some of the things that have been debated even in the political spectrum here, where every political campaign, there's always a talk about outsourcing and companies sending jobs overseas. In 2016, President Trump said, we want to bring jobs back from overseas to America. That was his campaign. It didn't quite work out the way he wanted, but that was his platform that he ran on. And so globalization of production is one of those hot topics that you always hear during political campaigns. So some of the other things here is the arguments for and against globalization. And so you have the slides that I just showed you that are here. I'll just show you again these different arguments for and against. These were actually on the slide of the last, actually the first chapter review that I did. This slide is included, so you know the arguments for and against. And then in the new economy, we have other issues when we talk about the effect of the digital network economy on markets and production. Obviously, we have the collapse of time and distance, lower entries to barriers to entry, the rise of certain emerging markets, and mass customization. Instead of mass standardization, we have mass customization. And then with production, able to get your products quickly, able to get products from around the world, quicker business cycles, getting your products in some cases the next day, greater access to different types of products from overseas. So you have a lot of these benefits in the new economy. Also, I mentioned the emerging markets, and you notice here I have reference to the BRICS nations: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and in some models, South Africa. And the MINT nations would be Mexico, Indonesia, Nigeria, and Turkey. And then the book later on in chapter 1 talks about global ethics and transparency, corporate social responsibility, good governance, protection of intellectual property, and anti-corruption measures. And this is all in the realm of global ethics and corporate social responsibility. Then we have the Cheeseless Cheetos article, which you should have reviewed. And if I just click on here and pull it up, you can get an idea of how comprehensive this article was. It's a short article, but very comprehensive. So make sure that you go through this article. It's a very short article, and there will be questions on this. And so you want to make sure that you are ready. In the first video, I had a embedded video called Globalization Explained in 1 Minute, and then an audio recording of a presentation that I gave some years ago on the topic of globalization. I probably will not have questions on that audio. That's just more FYI for you. If you want to take a listen, you can. And then this is a link to the first chapter review. And I have it also embedded here, so you can take a look at it. Okay, so I am going to go on to chapter 2, the evolution of international business. And that chapter deals a lot with theories. And we're talking about theories that evolved over a long period of time, stemming all the way from the barter era, where you're trading one good for the other, and going through the mercantilism era, then going to the 18th century and the 19th century, where other theories were conceived, and all the way up until the current era. So there are a number of things. When you talk about trade, you have to look at barter. I want to kind of draw a scenario for you. And I actually have an iPad, but I was trying to use it to record this video, and I kept getting this echo from the iPad. I was trying to do it via Zoom, but for some reason it wasn't working out. So I'm going to have to do it this way, and I'm hoping that you will see this. I'll make my best effort. So we talk about trade. One of the first forms of trade is, we know, so you have exchanges between at least two individuals. And we know what a market is. A market deals with exchanges. I hope you all can see that. And these exchanges have to be fair. So when you have an exchange where both sides benefit, that is called a positive sum game. Don't ask me why, but that's what it's called. A situation where only one side benefits is called a zero-sum game. So in this situation, you have two partners. Let's just say they're two partners. One produces bananas, and the other produces pineapples. Okay? And let's say they're not only producers, but they also want to sell different types of produce. And so let's say the trader that produces bananas wants pineapples. The trader that produces pineapples wants bananas. Right? So, in this situation, let's say they're in the market, they originally don't know each other, but let's say they're asking around and they've already made their wants known. And so someone points this trader to the guy who produces pineapples. And they say, yeah, I know a guy who wants bananas that you produce. You want pineapples, go see this guy. So these two traders get together and then they decide on the terms of trade that how many pineapples will make up how many bananas. That's what's called a terms of trade. You have to figure out what's going to be the par value between bananas and pineapples. And so once they figure that out, then the bananas will go here and the pineapples will go here. Pretty easy, right? You just figure out the terms of trade and then you make the trade. Now, that's barter, and it's very, I would say it is very intuitive to understand. But let's say that something changes, and I erase this, and let's say the trader that produces pineapples actually wants mangoes instead. Now this situation has changed because you have what? You have a zero-sum game. Only one side benefits. This person does not have mangoes that they want. So you have one side benefiting. They get their pineapples, but they don't get their mangoes. So you have a zero-sum game. So what has to occur is that you have to find a third person that will make all of this work. And so you have someone who produces mangoes, and let's say they want bananas. Okay? So you can see where I'm going with this. But if any two of these parties traded with each other, then there would always be a zero-sum game. One side will not be happy with the outcome of the trade. So what has to happen? A counter trade situation has to happen where you find this third party. And let's say this trader knows someone who produces mangoes and wants bananas. And they're thinking, okay, well, I have an idea. I will take these bananas, even though I don't want these bananas, I'm going to take them in the interim and then use those bananas to then trade with the mango person. And then these mangoes come here. And of course, these pineapples come here. So these two traders trade. These bananas come here, and then those bananas go to the mango person, and then they trade the mangoes for bananas. So everyone's happy. This trader can even tell the banana person to ship those directly to the address of the mango trader. Like, I don't even want to hold them. Just send those to this mango trader, and then the deal is complete. This is called counter trade, and you can kind of tell by the wording, the whole idea of counter trade, and this is still used today, and it conserves currency. It conserves. It makes things a little less complicated, but certainly with barter, you see that you have to have the exact circumstances in order for everyone to have a positive outcome. Because we want a positive sum game for all. And in this way, you have to have a precise way of accommodating everybody else that's in the trade arena. Okay, I want to show you one other thing with this board. I have, of course, erased it, but we're talking about this idea. I'm actually going to turn it this way, and I hope it's still visible. I'm going to move around, and hopefully I can have the whole iPad thing worked out so that way I could just draw it on the iPad and you all can see it with no problem. When we talk about trade, we talk about the movement of products across borders. And so let's go, if we remember this graph here, right? And I'm just going to do this very quickly. And I know it seems like, well, it's covering new material, but this is more or less a review. We know about the equilibrium. This is where demand equals supply. This is demand curve. This is supply curve. This is price. This is quantity. This is of course, the equilibrium. This is the equilibrium for quantity. This is the equilibrium for price. This is the point at which seller's price is met and the point at which the buyer's price that they want to pay is also met. And so this represents a perfect market. So let's say, for example, that you have a situation where the equilibrium begins to decrease as the markets become saturated and price starts to go down. You might have a situation where downward price pressures, let's say this price goes down, your price has remained here while the price is decreasing for that product. So then what happens? You have a situation where you've created market friction. So what has happened now is that you have a situation where quantity supply, this is the intersection with the supply curve, is greater than quantity demanded. So when quantity supplied is greater than quantity demanded, you have a what? A surplus. So this area represents a surplus. So what may you have to do? Well, you might have to lower your prices. Your prices may have to come down to the new equilibrium point. Perhaps your price that was being that you were selling it for before is no longer the equilibrium price. That price has come down, so then you have to also lower your prices. Notice that as the price goes down, that surplus gets smaller and smaller until you get back down to the new equilibrium. Because otherwise you have this surplus here. So what happens if you have a surplus and you really don't want to bring down your prices because you're thinking, I'm going to lose money. I have paid X amount per unit for this, and if I go down, that's going to eat up my margins and I'm going to lose money. So you may think that, okay, I have to find another way because I don't want to lose money. I want to kind of salvage this situation. So then you might say, okay, maybe I can find another buyer, and that buyer actually may be overseas. So you look for another market, and so let's draw another supply and demand curve here. And let's say you have a situation where in this country that we're drawing, there is a what? Shortage. This represents a shortage because these products are not readily available in this country. You have the same annotations, price, quantity down here, but you have a shortage. This represents a shortage. How do we know that? Well, we know that because quantity demanded is greater than quantity supplied. So it's just the opposite as before. Quantity demanded is greater than quantity supplied, so you have a shortage. So it makes sense that I would send this surplus from this country to a place that has a shortage. Right? Makes perfect sense. You have to find where that country is, and then not only that, you have to deal with any barriers that may be between country A and country B. And that can be in the form of taxes or tariffs. It can be in the form of non-tariff barriers. Non-tariff barriers such as quotas, this country limiting the amount that you can bring in, or maybe quality requirements, sanitation requirements. Maybe there are administrative delays here in terms of getting licenses. Maybe there's some kind of a waiting period for foreign companies. There are all these barriers that take place. But this is the basic scheme. You have a surplus here, you have a shortage here, you find this market, you may have to pay some taxes, but it may be worth the trade-off because you might be able to recoup some of your profits. And then there are other markets as well. So that's essentially what we're looking at. Countries look at trade in a way to help them maximize their output and maybe salvage products in markets that are saturated. And so you see here with the tariffs, which is a barrier. It could be a barrier. It doesn't have to be a barrier. You could essentially pay the tax to get your products in. And all these non-tariff barriers, which it could be inspections, it can be certain limitations in terms of size. Products have to be packaged a certain way. There can be a lot of barriers. And so this in chapter 2 talks about the theories in terms of absolute and comparative advantage. This is very important. The idea that you have countries specializing, meaning that they'll use their factor endowments to produce specific goods. In the US and many countries, they have the ability to produce many products and services because they're wealthy, they're industrialized, and they have the output or the capacity to produce the output. Whereas some countries are limited in their output because they have either limited capital investment, they have limited assets, they have limited skill, their labor that they have is unskilled, and so there are the limitations. And so you have situations where countries rely heavily on agricultural products, and then you have other countries that rely on those products as inputs, raw materials. Many developing nations provide raw materials like cocoa and cotton and copper and steel and oil and many of these products that are inputs for finished goods or for other types of goods that are sold. So absolute advantage means that if you have a situation where you have an advantage at producing one particular good, you will specialize in that. Okay, so I'm going to do one more thing, and then I'm going to wind down because we're at 45 minutes thereabout. And so we talk about a nation specializing, and how do they specialize? Well, in economics, you also have something called a production possibility curve, which kind of looks like this. You probably have seen this before. And let's say you have rice. Actually, let's use the example that we just had. Let's say this is bananas. And let's say this is mangoes down here. Let's say you're a trader, and I'm making a mess here. You're a trader, and you can produce both of these. You found out a way to produce both. And you have limited resources. This represents the limit to your resources. Sometimes you'll see the production possibility curve like this, in a curve. Sometimes you'll see it in a straight line. But let's just do the straight line for now. But these represents combinations of both. So this point here, along this is the amount of resources you have. This represents the resource input. Says that you produce this number of bananas and this number of mangoes. So at this point of resource, you produce this much bananas and this amount of mangoes. so on and so forth, until you get here, which represents all mangoes. So all of your resources are being used to produce mangoes. At this point, all bananas. Which means that if you get to this point, and I'm making sure you all can see this. I'm not sure if you can see it. But when you get to this point and you have all bananas, that means that you have specialized in producing all bananas. And at this point here, you're specializing in all mangoes. And when you specialize, that means that you're going to be trading or exporting mangoes and then importing bananas. They're going to be obviously importing mangoes and exporting bananas. And so that's how the specialization will work. Why? Because they have developed a particular specialty for producing bananas, and you've developed a specialty for producing mangoes. All of your resources along this line goes to producing one or the other. And if you're more efficient at producing mangoes, you produce mangoes, and you import what you're not as efficient at producing, which is how these theories work. Of course, if you're producing here, or if you have this point, you cannot reach that point because you don't have the resources. So what may have to happen is if you want to produce at this level, or if you want to produce at a higher level, you're going to have to find resources that will allow a greater output at this point. So what might that be? That might be maybe an increase in the amount of land you have, maybe the quality of land, maybe make it more fertile. Maybe your output is a function of labor. Maybe it's a function of capital, investment, better equipment, better machinery. And that will help you increase your level of production to both products. So that's it for as far as that's concerned. Hopefully that gives you a general idea of how these things will work. But be that as it may, in Chapter 2 talks about a lot of those theories. Make sure you have a good understanding of that. And for Chapter 3, this chapter talks primarily about different regional economic integration, the different levels. And the different levels that they that they describe, and I'm actually going into my slides, and as you can see this slide here. They have a diagram here that shows you the different levels, 5 different levels. It's ironic because in my other class, they have, in actually also Chapter 3, they give 4 levels. And they don't include political union, which is the last level that you see here. The political union is the most integrated as far as having a political system to manage multiple countries. So if you can imagine, if NAFTA or the USMCA became a political union, that would mean that Canada, Mexico, and the United States would have one government that is managing all 3 countries. One political apparatus managing all 3 countries. And it's almost like a power sharing agreement that they have, where you have to certainly give up some sovereignty in order for that to happen. So you have 5 levels: free trade area, which is no tariffs between borders, or across borders. Customs union, which is a uniform external tariff. Common market includes the first two, but then also includes free movement of endowments such as labor and other resources. And then economic and monetary union is when you synthesize the economic policies, may include a common currency like what you have in the European Union. And then finally, the political union, which means that you have a governing body that will manage more than one entity, which we have not seen as of yet. Obviously, there are benefits and costs. You want to note these. I noted these in the previous chapter video that I did, even though that was from last year, but it's the same material. And the costs: losing sovereignty, as I mentioned, reducing the powers of the national government, making some concessions. All of these are costs of regional integration. And you have various types of arrangements: European Union, NAFTA, ASEAN. You have several in Latin America. You have CARICOM, that's in the Caribbean Common Market. You have some in Africa. ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States. You have SADC, you have the East African Community. You have a number of these, but the European Union tends to, at this point, is the most influential and the most powerful as a bloc. And then, of course, the USMCA was renegotiated by President Trump. And you have a number of other groups that are being devised, such as the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which has stalled because of the withdrawal of President Trump. But I think with President Biden, they may revisit the negotiations. Some of the other things here, these are just regional groupings telling you what countries are part of which groupings. And that is it. It didn't get into a lot of the other regional groupings, and it's unfortunate that they only focused on a few. But that should give you a pretty good idea of how this exam will go. And I have made a list here of many of the topics, so you want to take a look at that. And again, I have uploaded the slides. You don't want to use the slides as the book because the slides are not as detailed and you won't get the content. And I will make sure on the exam that I will include enough questions where you would have had to have purchased the book or have at least gone through the slides in order to be able to address the questions. So we're at almost an hour, and I am going to close out, and hopefully this is helpful. This will give you an idea of some of the things that I'll be looking for. The economics, the charts that I was drawing, is probably a review for you, so you will have some familiarity with that. So if I ask questions on basic supply and demand and equilibrium and price elasticity, you would have an idea of what that is. Okay, so if you have any questions, you can send me an email, and I will be certain to get back to you on that. And have a good rest of the weekend, and I'll see you next week. Take care.